Welcome to the deep dive. You've carved out some time, and we're going to make it count.
Absolutely.
We're diving straight into something we all navigate. Intimate relationships.
hmm
Forget those quick hit articles or, outdated advice. We've got some really compelling research here.
Yeah, stuff that kind of flips the script on what we think we know about dating, sex, marriage, all of it.
Exactly. Consider this your shortcut to more informed perspective.
And today's deep dive, it pulls from Matthew D. Johnson's book, Great Myths of Psychology, Great Myths of Intimate Relationships, Dating, Sex, and Marriage.
Right.
It's a fantastic resource because it takes those, widely accepted
That's the
beliefs.
stuff everyone just assumes is true.
Yeah, exactly. And it rigorously examines them through the lens of, psychological science.
And Johnson doesn't just skim the surface, does he? He really digs in.
Oh, absolutely. He dives deep into loads of studies, real-world examples.
Okay. So our goal today is to pull out the most insightful and maybe frankly surprising findings.
Give you a clear, evidence-based understanding of what truly shapes our relationships. The good, the challenging.
Everything in between. Yeah. We're aiming for those aha moments, right?
Stuff that resonates and offers practical value without, getting totally lost in academic jargon.
Okay, let's do it. Let's unpack our first topic. It's something pretty fundamental to intimacy. Sexual arousal.
Yeah, and it's fascinating how research has explored the interplay between, our physical responses and what we say we feel, our subjective experience.
Especially the differences between men and women.
Exactly. Johnson highlights studies that used a whole range of visual stimuli, neutral landscapes, primates doing their thing.
Primates, okay.
Yeah. And same-sex couples, different sex couples. And they meticulously measured participants' physiological responses.
Like what their bodies were actually doing.
Right, alongside what they reported feeling.
And what those measurements revealed?
Well, I get the feeling it might make us reconsider some things.
Oh, definitely. For men, the findings were, well, relatively straightforward.
Okay. Their self-reported levels of arousal lined up pretty closely with the physiological data.
Which was measured how?
Using penile plethysmography. Basically, it measures changes in penile circumference.
Gotcha.
And, yeah, they were aroused by the types of stimuli you'd expect based on their sexual orientation. No big surprises there.
But let me guess, the picture for women was a bit more complex.
Yeah. As often as the case with sexuality, yes. Far more intricate.
So what did they find?
Well, while women's subjective ratings, what they said turned them on, seemed to follow anticipated patterns.
Like straight women reporting more arousal to male-female pairings, lesbian women to female-female pairings.
Exactly. But their bodies showed a broader response.
How so?
Using vaginal plethysmography that measures vaginal blood flow, researchers saw significant physiological arousal in women across a wider spectrum of stimuli.
Wider.
Meaning, regardless of the gender configuration in the videos.
Wait, so women who identified as straight showed physiological arousal to lesbian clips too? Yep.
And vice versa. And even, remember the primates?
Yeah.
Even footage of bonobos engaging in sexual activity elicited a measurable physiological response in some women.
Whoa.
And get this, in one instance, a handsome naked man just strolling on a beach didn't generate as much vaginal blood flow as those bonobos.
That's wild. So it really underscores this potential disconnect, right? Between what women consciously report and how their bodies respond.
Absolutely. The data strongly suggest a degree of, physiological pansexuality in women.
Physiological pansexuality, meaning their bodies might just be responsive to a broader range of stuff than their stated attraction.
Precisely. And it raises a really important question. What does this tell us about the complexities of female sexual response? And why have our traditional understandings been so simplistic?
Yeah, it definitely throws a curveball into that traditional idea that arousal is just a simple reflection of preference, at least for women.
Okay.
Let's pivot a bit to a topic that can feel quite sensitive, unconsummated marriages, and also the maybe less discussed reality of low-sex relationships.
Right. And what's striking is that while we might assume unconsummated marriages are like relics of the past, they do still happen.
Really?
Yeah. Johnson references earlier research, particularly from the mid-20th century, focusing on what they called virgin wives back then.
Okay.
And these studies revealed that often the main obstacle wasn't a lack of desire necessarily.
No, what was it then?
It was a significant fear of painful intercourse.
Yeah.
Medically, that's dyspareunia,
Dyspareunia.
which is frequently linked to a condition called vaginismus. That's where the muscles around the vagina involuntarily contract, making penetration really difficult or even impossible.
Wow, okay. That makes a lot of sense. Fear can be such a powerful barrier, especially with something so intimate.
Totally.
And it wasn't just a female issue, right?
Not at all. The research also consistently highlighted erectile dysfunction and premature ejaculation as significant factors reported by men. But the encouraging aspect here, as Johnson points out, is that effective treatments, medical, psychological, they exist for both dyspareunia and these male sexual health concerns.
That's good to know. And
Yeah.
there's a broader context too, isn't there? Like societal factors.
Definitely. In more traditional or, say, religious communities, couples facing these things might first turn to clergy for guidance.
Mm-hmm.
And while their intentions are undoubtedly good, they might lack the specific medical or psychological training needed.
Which could inadvertently make things worse, add to the couple's distress.
Exactly. It can add to the distress, the sense of isolation. If you zoom out, you see how societal expectations around sex, maybe a lack of good sex ed.
And just deeply ingrained cultural norms.
Right. They can all contribute. Now, let's shift to something maybe more common for many long-term couples. The reality of low or even no-sex marriages.
Yeah, this is something I suspect many people experience but might feel, I don't know, embarrassed or alone about. There's almost this unspoken pressure, right? Fueled by media portrayals, maybe, that married couples should be constantly active.
Totally. The media often paints this highly unrealistic picture of marital sexual frequency.
So what's the reality?
What's crucial to understand is that a natural decline in libido is actually pretty common in committed long-term relationships.
Really? It's normal.
It can be, yeah. It doesn't automatically signal a problem with you or your partner or the relationship itself.
That must be somewhat reassuring to hear, especially if you feel like you're the only ones going through it.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, for many people, a low-sex marriage can lead to significant unhappiness, can't it?
Absolutely. While some couples find a comfortable balance with less sex, others experience profound feelings of loneliness, emotional hurt, frustration.
They miss that intimacy they once shared.
Exactly. They yearn to reignite that connection, which, begs the question, how do you do that? How do you rekindle desire?
And according to Johnson, there's no, like, magic bullet, right? No
Yeah.
quick fix pill or cream.
Nope. It sounds like it often requires conscious effort, maybe a shift in perspective.
What kind of strategies does he mention?
Well, he discusses several things some couples find helpful. One approach is to intentionally schedule sex.
Schedule it. Like exercise.
Kind of, yeah.
Huh.
Even if the initial desire isn't strong. The idea is that sometimes the desire can follow the act.
Interesting. Okay. What else?
Another strategy involves trying to see your partner with fresh eyes, almost like they were someone new,
How would you even do that?
maybe through role-playing scenarios or even intentionally meeting up for a date like you weren't already a couple.
Trying to recapture some novelty.
Exactly. Reintroduce a sense of novelty and otherness. That's what can fuel eroticism, which sometimes fades into that comfortable familiarity. The flannel nightgown effect Esther Perel talks about.
Right, right. That makes intuitive sense. Eroticism often thrives on a bit of mystery, distance. It's almost paradoxical in a long-term thing.
It is. And Johnson also breaks down the 4 key components of sexual functioning: desire, arousal, orgasm, and satisfaction.
And problems in any of those areas can lead to a low-sex relationship.
Yeah, they can contribute. And while a fulfilling sex life can definitely boost relationship satisfaction.
And a bad one can really detract from it.
Right. But the correlation isn't absolute. Johnson highlights that there are happy couples with less than satisfying sex lives, and vice versa.
Okay.
But it's worth saying again, effective treatments are available for improving sexual functioning if a couple wants to address those issues.
Good point. Okay, let's switch gears again. Let's delve into the world of dating advice. Stuff that's been around forever.
All right.
First up, the age-old suggestion to play hard to get. Does pretending you're not interested actually make you more attractive?
The classic, play hard to get. It's so ingrained in our dating scripts, isn't it?
Totally.
The idea is, yeah, by appearing less available, less enthusiastic, you somehow boost your desirability.
So does it work? What does the research say?
Well, Johnson looks at some of the earliest studies that tackled this myth directly. And, spoiler alert, the findings might surprise you.
Okay, how did they test it?
They did studies with adolescents. Participants rated the social desirability of hypothetical people described as showing different levels of interest in someone else.
Like, very interested, not interested, or kind of unknown.
Exactly. And if playing hard to get worked, you'd expect the disinterested people to be rated as more appealing, right?
Illogically, yeah.
Yeah.
But following the pattern here, that's not what happened.
Precisely. The studies actually show the opposite.
Really?
Yeah. Individuals described as being genuinely interested in the other person were consistently rated as more socially desirable.
Ah.
There was just no evidence suggesting any benefit to appearing aloof, distant, or uninterested.
Well, so much for that. It seems like showing some real interest might actually be better.
Looks that way.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about another aspect of attraction, being smooth.
Ah, yes. The smooth operator. We've all seen those characters in movies or maybe even in real life who just seem to effortlessly charm everyone.
Right, that smooth demeanor, does it actually increase your chances?
Yeah, does it work?
The idea of smoothness often brings up specific nonverbal things, right? How someone walks, uses touch, makes eye contact.
Like the Hitch movie, the 90% rule for kissing.
Exactly. Though that rule is a bit dubious.
Yeah.
But when you look at the science, the impact of nonverbal smoothness is, well, more nuanced.
How so?
Well, one aspect is behavioral synchrony, that subtle, often unconscious mirroring when you like someone.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean.
Research shows that tends to happen naturally in positive interactions. It's usually not some deliberate tactic.
Okay. What about more intentional stuff, like opening lines?
Ah, yes. The research there shows some interesting differences between how men and women respond.
Okay, spill the tea. What did they find?
Studies looked at women's nonverbal cues of interest first. Things like genuine smiles, head nods, leaning forward, maybe initiating brief, non-threatening touch, comfortable eye contact. Those indicated interest.
Makes sense. What about the lines themselves?
When researchers looked at opening lines, women generally reacted better to direct and pretty innocuous approaches.
Like what?
Like, I feel a little embarrassed, but I'd like to meet you, or couldn't help noticing you, stuff like that.
So not the cheesy pickup lines.
Generally, no. They tended to be less receptive to overly clever, flippant, or cliche lines.
Okay, so for guys approaching women, sincerity, directness, better than cheesy charm. What about the other way around? What lines do men respond to?
Interestingly, research suggests men, on average, react positively to a much wider range of opening lines from women.
Really?
Yeah, Johnson mentions a bit of a ceiling effect. It implies men might be less discriminating about the specific words of an initial approach.
Huh. So women have more leeway.
Maybe a bit. But the overarching message seems to be, being authentic and direct is generally a better foundation than trying too hard to be smooth.
Right.
And hey, social skills aren't fixed. They can be learned, improved. Overdoing the smooth thing can seem fake anyway. Might even hide some endearing clumsiness.
That's a really good point. Sometimes a bit of genuine awkwardness is more relatable. Okay, let's move on. Another big one. Opposites attract. We hear it all the time. Any science behind it?
Opposites attract. It's incredibly pervasive, but when you look at the actual research, there's very little support for it.
Seriously.
Yeah. The principle that consistently shows up as a strong predictor of initial attraction is homogamy.
Homogamy, meaning...
Basically, similarity leads to attraction.
So birds of a feather flock together is actually true, at least initially.
Precisely. Some of the key research goes way back. Like, studies in the 50s found that the more similar men were who lived together, the more they liked each other.
Okay.
And a huge meta-analysis looking at hundreds of studies across different cultures confirmed it. A significant positive link between similarity and attraction.
Similarity in what? Attitudes, values.
Yep. Attitudes, values, personality traits, even demographics.
Wow. That's pretty strong evidence against opposites attract. But what about long term? Maybe differences create like balance, complementarity.
That's a logical thought, right? That differences might fill gaps or provide balance.
Yeah.
But the research doesn't really support that either. Studies find relationship satisfaction, stability. They're not linked to having complementary interests, attitudes, or even spending habits.
So different couples don't have better outcomes.
No consistent evidence for it.
Yeah.
Interestingly, even with traditional gender roles, research sometimes suggests the best outcomes happen when both partners have more feminine traits, like expressiveness, nurturance.
Rather than strong masculine-feminine contrast.
Exactly.
Wow, that really flicks some ingrained ideas. So the overwhelming science points to similarity, not opposition, for attraction and satisfaction. Okay. Let's talk modern dating, online dating. Does having access to this huge pool of people online actually increase your chances of finding the one? That ideal long-term partner?
Well, on the surface, it seems like it should, right?
Yeah.
Access to so many profiles.
Yeah.
Got to be an advantage.
Yeah, seems logical.
But Johnson outlined some compelling arguments and research findings, suggesting this seemingly limitless pool might not be as great for finding a truly satisfying long-term relationship as we think.
Okay, I'm listening. What are the downsides?
Well, firstly, the info in profiles often isn't that reliable or helpful for predicting long-term compatibility.
How so?
People tend to present idealized versions of themselves, right? Highlight the good stuff, downplay the not so good. Plus, we often focus on superficial things, looks, hobbies, which might not predict deeper compatibility.
True. What else?
Secondly, the very act of constantly browsing, comparing profiles, it can actually hinder relationship development.
Because you're always looking for the next best thing.
Exactly. Instead of focusing on getting to know one person, letting a connection grow, you're constantly evaluating them against this endless stream of other options.
Yeah, that better deal mentality. Like you're always wondering if someone better is just a swipe away.
Precisely.
Right.
Which prevents fully investing. And that leads to the third point. Having such a large pool can ironically lead to less satisfying choices.
How does that work?
Research on decision-making shows when we have too many options, we get overwhelmed. We might end up picking partners who are actually further from our ideal than if we had a smaller pool.
Choice overload.
Yep. Especially for maximizers. People always trying to find the absolute best. They keep searching, comparing, instead of evaluating someone who could be a really good fit. They get fatigued, make poorer choices.
And relationship satisfaction is linked to how close your partner is to your ideal.
Consistently, yes.
So paradoxically, all those options might actually make it harder to find someone compatible and build something lasting. Huh. That's kind of sobering.
Yeah.
But what about another aspect of online stuff? Can texting, computer-mediated communication CMC, can that actually foster real intimacy?
Yeah, that was a big question initially. There were concerns that CMC, lacking all those nonverbal cues from face-to-face interaction wouldn't be enough for true intimacy.
Right, you miss the body language, the tone.
Exactly. But research shows people are remarkably adaptive. We develop new ways to convey and interpret cues online.
Like what kind of cues work online for intimacy?
Well, one interesting one is the speed of response to texts,
Really, how fast you text back matters.
especially among younger folks, yeah. A prompt reply is often seen as a sign of attentiveness, interest, support. And research backs this up faster responses link to greater perceived social support and care.
Huh, okay.
But more broadly, studies since the 90s consistently show CMC can foster intimacy. One study even found text-only couples made more statements of affection than face-to-face couples.
Wow, more! That's counterintuitive.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And both text-only and visual CMC groups, like using webcams, reported more intimate self-disclosures and asked more personal questions compared to face-to-face groups.
Why would that be?
It seems the perceived attention level and the weight given to self-disclosures might be amplified in CMC. People also tend to make positive interpretations of ambiguous online stuff.
Like giving the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, and those positive interpretations seem to boost intimacy more strongly in CMC than face-to-face. Maybe because CMC listeners give more weight to the act of disclosure itself when nonverbals are limited.
Okay.
So the takeaway is, using CMC before meeting or to enhance existing relationships, local or long distance, seems beneficial for intimacy. It's not just the words, but the act of connecting digitally matters.
So all those late-night texts might actually be building deeper connections. Good to know. Now, what about those dating site algorithms, the ones promising to match you?
Ah, yes, the matching algorithms.
Are couples matched by these services actually more likely to have satisfying, lasting relationships?
Well, the basic idea behind many platforms is that their fancy algorithms, often using personality tests like the Big Five, plus your preferences, can predict compatibility and lead to better relationships.
Sounds logical in theory, using data to find your match.
It does. But the actual effectiveness in reliably predicting long-term success is still, well, debated.
It's not a sure thing.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Johnson also points out how significant personality disorders can be in relationships.
Okay.
These are pervasive, stable behavior patterns causing real impairment. Things like high psychopathic traits, lack of empathy, or borderline personality disorder. These are linked to marital distress, divorce.
So personality definitely matters, but an algorithm capturing all the nuances needed to predict long-term compatibility.
That's the tricky part. It's still not entirely clear if an algorithm, no matter how complex, can truly nail it.
So while these sites are convenient for meeting people,
Relying solely on the algorithm as a guarantee for finding the one might be oversimplifying a really complex human process.
got it. Okay, let's shift focus now to same-sex relationships. Are there fundamental differences compared to heterosexual relationships?
Yeah, research on sexual minority individuals and families has really grown in recent decades, which is great, reflecting more social acceptance in many places.
Though not everywhere, unfortunately.
Absolutely not. Significant challenges and repression persist elsewhere. That sociopolitical context is crucial when interpreting research here.
And one specific area you mentioned earlier was sexual fluidity, comparing men and women.
Exactly. As we touched on with arousal, studies using physiological measures and self-reports consistently suggest women tend to show greater sexual fluidity than men.
The broader physiological arousal response we talked about.
Right. Women showing arousal to a wider range of stimuli, regardless of gender pairing, while men's arousal patterns align more closely with their orientation.
And the link between self-reported arousal and genital arousal is stronger for men, too.
Generally, yes. Small to medium for women, stronger for men.
Okay. So while the core experiences of love, commitment might be similar across relationship types.
Some interesting distinctions do emerge from the research.
Like what?
Well, while fundamental needs for connection, intimacy, support seem universal, research has identified some reliable differences. For instance, studies often find male same-sex couples tend to report having sex more frequently and experiencing greater sexual satisfaction compared to both female same-sex couples and heterosexual couples.
Interesting. And female same-sex couples.
They often report less frequent sex and lower levels of sexual satisfaction in that area compared to the other two groups.
Huh. Any theories why?
Researchers are still exploring it. It's likely complex social factors, cultural influences, communication styles around sex, different expectations, lots potentially playing a role. More research is needed.
What about relationship stability? Dissolution rates?
Some older research suggested same-sex couples might historically have faced higher dissolution rates than married heterosexual couples.
But that's debated.
Highly debated. And it's crucial to consider societal stigma, lack of legal recognition and support in the past. As norms and laws evolve, those rates might change or maybe already have.
So the overall picture is?
Increasingly, research highlights the fundamental similarities in the dynamics of love and commitment across same-sex and other sex relationships. More similarities than differences.
That's a really important point, especially given some of the misinformation out there. Now let's directly tackle a really harmful myth used against same-sex marriage.
Okay.
The false claim that children raised by same-sex parents are somehow disadvantaged.
Ugh, yeah. This claim has been deeply damaging, and it's often rooted in flawed or, frankly, ideologically motivated research, not sound science.
Johnson addresses this.
He does. Specifically, a widely publicized, very controversial study from 2012 that claimed negative outcomes for kids with same-sex parents.
And that study faced huge criticism, right?
Massive criticism. Methodological flaws, known funding from anti-LGBTQ plus groups, a highly questionable review process.
What was questionable about the review?
Significant irregularities, how the study was initiated, the weirdly fast publication timeline, and the revelation that two paid consultants for the study also served as reviewers for the journal publishing it. A huge ethical breach.
Wow.
An independent inquiry later found serious flaws and distortions in the review process for that study.
So basically, its findings should be taken with a massive grain of salt, if not dismissed.
Absolutely. And the overwhelming consensus within the relevant scientific fields.
What do the experts agree on?
Psychology, sociology, pediatrics. Leading professional organizations like the APA are unequivocal. There is zero credible evidence suggesting any difference in adjustment, development, or well-being for kids raised by same-sex parents versus heterosexual parents.
Zero difference.
Zero. The robust research consistently shows what matters is having loving, supportive, stable homes. The parent's sexual orientation is irrelevant to that.
Such a vital point. Reassuring to know the science is so clear. Okay, finally, let's tackle a common modern practice. Cohabitation. The idea that living together before marriage is a reliable test drive.
Right. Non-marital cohabitation is super common now in many places, like the U.S. Attitudes are way more accepting. For many couples, it's just a standard step before marriage.
But does it actually work as a test? Does cohabiting before commitment predict better marital outcomes?
That's where it gets complex. And the research often points in a, well, maybe unexpected direction.
How so? It seems like a good way to see if you're compatible day to day.
You'd think so. But some studies indicate couples who live together before making a clear commitment, like getting engaged, might actually face a slightly higher risk of divorce.
Higher, not
A
lower.
higher risk of divorce and sometimes lower marital satisfaction compared to couples who marry without living together first, or who only move in after getting engaged.
Why would that be?
One prominent theory is the inertia hypothesis.
Inertia.
Yeah, the idea is some couples might slide into marriage after living together for a while. Not necessarily because they made a deep, intentional decision, but more because, well, it's convenient. Breaking up seems harder than just getting married. The relationship gains inertia.
Ah, so the intentionality behind the decision to marry is key.
Exactly. The timing seems crucial. Research suggests cohabiting after a clear commitment to marry doesn't carry those same negative associations.
Right.
Moving in beforehand without that explicit intention, that's where the potential issues link up.
It really highlights deliberate decision-making and commitment. Wow. This has been such an illuminating deep dive. Seriously, we've uncovered some surprising stuff and challenged a lot of conventional wisdom.
Absolutely. We've seen how arousal is way more nuanced than stereotypes suggest, how desire naturally changes in long-term relationships.
The unexpected twists of online dating, the core similarities between different couples.
And yeah, the crucial need to evaluate claims about families and premarital stuff based on actual research, not myths.
And some details really stick, right? Like the arousal differences, the fact that just being interested is more attractive than playing games.
And that similarity, not opposition, is such a strong predictor of attraction. These insights really make you rethink things.
Yeah. And understanding these dynamics can be super valuable for navigating our own relationships, right? Whether you're dating, married for ages, or just curious about people.
Definitely. It fosters more realistic expectations, maybe a deeper appreciation for how complex relationships really are.
And we've really just scratched the surface of what Matthew Johnson covers in his book.
Oh yeah, so much more there.
So we definitely encourage you, our listener, if any of this piqued your interest, dive deeper, explore the research.
For sure. Which brings us to maybe a final thought to leave people with.
Okay.
Given the evidence against things like playing hard to get and the benefits of clear, direct communication for intimacy, what if?
What if?
What might relationships look like if we all just embraced a bit more transparency, more authenticity? If we collectively ditched the games and went for clearer intentions?
Could that lead to more genuine, maybe more fulfilling connections?
It's definitely something to ponder.